Hey everyone, how are we? We all right? Let me just get myself sorted and get rid of Ashley's rubbish. Welcome to my world. And here we go. We have been talking about the life you ordered, and this month is about in order to pray, which I'm really excited about. And as a church, we're really excited about that leadership team. Of course, we know we pray, but just a real strong focus on that. So my topic for today is hearing from God, which is a part of prayer, right? So that all makes perfect sense. We're going to start off with a story. I love stories. That's just how I learn things. Things make sense to me through stories. So I'm going to tell you a story, and it's a great story about a young person hearing from God, and it all seems so easy. Are you ready? So put your best listening ears on, because this story is packed with details that are important. Okay, 1 Samuel 3. The boy Samuel ministered before the Lord under Eli. In those days, the word of the Lord was rare. There were not many visions. One night, Eli, whose eyes were becoming so weak that he could barely see, was lying down in his usual place. The lamp of God had not yet gone out, and Samuel was lying down in the house of the Lord where the Ark of the Covenant was. Then the Lord called Samuel. Samuel answered, "Here I am." And he ran to Eli and said, "Here I am. You called me?" But Eli said, "I did not call. Go back and lie down." So he went and lay down. Again, the Lord called Samuel, and Samuel got up and went to Eli and said, "Here I am. You called me?" "My son," I don't know the tone. This is time 3, right? What's the tone here? I'm going to go, he was just polite, and he's an old person, he was polite. But if that was me, it would be a different tone. "My son," Eli said, "I did not call. Go back and lie down." Now Samuel did not yet know the Lord. The word of the Lord had not yet been revealed to him. A third time the Lord called Samuel, and Samuel got up and went to Eli and said, "Here I am, you called me." Then Eli realized that the Lord was calling the boy. So Eli told Samuel, "Go and lie down, and if he calls you, say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.'" So Samuel went and lay down in his place. The Lord came and stood there calling calling from the other times. "Samuel, Samuel," he said. Then Samuel said, "Speak, for your servant is listening." And the Lord said to Samuel, "See, I'm about to do something in Israel that will make the ears of everyone who hears tingle." Wowza. "At that time, I will carry out against Eli everything I have spoke against his family from beginning to end. For I told him that I would judge his family forever because of the sin he knew about his sons were blaspheming to God, and he failed to restrain them. Therefore I swore to the house of Eli, the guilt of Eli's house will never be atoned for by sacrifice or offering." Samuel lay down until morning. I bet he didn't sleep. And then he opened the doors of the house of the Lord. He was afraid to tell Eli the vision. But Eli called him and said, "Samuel, my son?" Samuel answered, "Here I am." "What was it he said to you?" Eli asked. "Do not hide it from me. May God deal with you, be it ever so severely, if you hide anything he told you." So Samuel told him everything, hiding nothing from him. Then Eli said, "He is the Lord. Let him do what is good in his eyes." So the backstory looks like this. Samuel's mum, Hannah, was in the temple. She couldn't have children, so she went before God and she was weeping in the temple. And Eli, the priest, saw her, went up to her and said, "Are you drunk?" Great. I don't know what time of day it was, but sure. She explained her pain, her heartbreak about not being able to have children. And then Eli, the priest, blessed her and sent her on her way. And very soon she had Samuel. Now, she knew Samuel was from God. So when he was weaned, that means he's no longer reliant on his mum for food. When he was weaned, I'm hoping that that's like 10, not 35 like these days, hey. When he was weaned, no judgment here, but anyway, when he was weaned, she sent him off to live in the temple. That's what she did with her kid that she cried out to God for. She sent him to live there. That's just, what a sacrifice she got, that he was not hers. He belonged to God. So then Hannah went on to have more sons and daughters, quite a few more sons. In comparison, Eli was also married and he had 2 boys. They were absolute scoundrels. Their practices were terrible. They could have been on their own show called Pastor's Kids Gone Wild, like a new reality show. They were sleeping with the prostitutes. They were taking sacrificial food. They were absolutely out of line. And God was furious because he knew Eli was seeing all this happening and doing nothing about it. So he called him to task and said, that's actually not okay. So God had this anger brewing because Eli was ignoring what he was doing. So meanwhile, this beautiful young boy, who we think got there when he was about 10, was in the temple growing up, waiting to hear from God. He still hadn't heard from God, but at some point God spoke to him. Do you know the saying, time to put your big boy pants on? That's what kind of went through my head when I looked at this story, because I want us to think about the balance of power in this story. Eli is a wise priest who's very much respected in his community, and Samuel's a little boy who hasn't heard from God and is just serving in the temple. He opens the doors, he washes things, he probably sweeps the floor and those kind of things. And he realises that when God does speak to him, that he has to tell his boss, the revered leader in the community, that God is not happy with him. Not easy. I don't know what the consequence of getting a word wrong from God was in those days, but I can imagine just in that balance of power, you would not be popular. So my question for you today is, are you confident you hear from God? Are you confident enough to stick your neck out because you hear from God? How do you know it's correct? I've had some absolute garbage words given to me over the years. I've been a Christian since I was 17. I should be a singer. I should be this. I should be that. People are very lazy with prophecy sometimes. It's not always right. Sometimes it's fantastic. And actually, Pastor Danny was here last night and he spoke to Joe and I when we first got married. We were 22 and he gave us a word and he remembered that. That is a word from God. I'm 52. It was a while ago. Do you know how to listen? Do you know how to listen to God? That's what I want us to think about today. I went to Tabor when I was in my mid-30s to study counselling. Excuse me. And I'd been a hairdresser for 20 years before that. I'd done some listening in 20 years, right? I know how to listen. But they taught me something in Tabor called active listening. It's the way to improve your listening skills to practice active listening. This is where you make a conscious effort to hear not only the words that another person is saying, but more importantly, the complete message that is being communicated. So I'd put us in some pointers. Pay attention and try to stay focused. Set aside your own biases and preoccupations. Listen without jumping to conclusions. Good. Don't interrupt. No one's writing these down. Mario, are you writing these down? No, I'm just kidding. Don't start planning what to say next. See, these points were very helpful for me to develop some personal skills, but they also can help us develop good God listening skills. Don't start planning what to say next when God is talking to you. Listen. So you may be thinking, does God actually speak to me? Or does God actually listen to me? I want to tell you it is a resounding yes. Call to me and I will answer you, and will tell you great and hidden things that you have not known, Jeremiah says. I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. I will counsel you with my eye on you. You see, Samuel thought God was speaking through Eli because he decided that God and Eli sounded the same. Strange. Do you remember that in the story? When he heard a voice, he knew what Eli sounded like, right? But somehow he'd linked that to that's what God sounds like. So I wonder, how have you decided what God sounds like? How have you decided what God sounds like? How have you decided what the actual character of God towards you is? How do you see his face? I think, curiously, a lot of us pick up what God is like from a male in our life. It could be a combination of people you know. It can be your dad, an uncle, a priest, a pastor, a youth leader, Sunday school teacher. Everyone thinks that Uncle Glenn sounds like God, or Matt Palmer when I use Matt Palmer also. It could be a minister, it could be a teacher, but I think we somehow in our psyche develop what we think God sounds like. I just thought that story was so curious. It's a mix of people's experience around us makes us think about what God sounds like. But the only way you can truly know what God sounds like is by reading his word. It's the only way. It's funny that we take on another voice though, isn't it? The problem with people is they are actually just people and they're not going to get it right all the time. The person that I came to faith under later really did the wrong thing by Joe and I. How do you do that parallel? Because people are just people, aren't they? Learning how God relates to people and how he spends time with people is only developed by talking to him and reading his word. This is my big idea for today. What you think God is thinking affects what you think God is saying. Is he a kind God? Does he love you? Does he know you? Is he championing you? Is he your cheerleader? Who is God to you? Jesus spent quite a lot of times telling stories about what God is like. And Pastor Ash shared a story from Matthew 25. The first story was the one about the 10 foolish, 5 foolish, 5 not foolish versions. And it was in Matthew 25. They're both in Matthew 25, these stories. But the first one was about the 5 girls that had the oil and the 5 girls that didn't have the oil. Organised girls, foolish girls. That's how I describe them in the Bible. So the story finishes with 5 girls that had to go off and get stuff, right? And curiously, this is what the last bit of that story, the moral of that story is. The groom says to the girls that weren't organised, he answers, "Do I know you? I don't think I know you." So the whole point of the story is these girls were getting ready for a wedding, but somehow in their disorganisation, God decides in the character that the groom doesn't know the brides or the bridesmaids, depending on your version of the story. So something in that story is God saying, you need to know me. He's a relational God. He wants to know you deeply. And Jesus' line after that is, so stay alert. You have no idea when he might arrive. Don't wait to know God. Know him now. Today is your day. We've just had time to know God already, right? And then the other story is the one that I was sort of mentioning before, is the parable of the talents. There was someone that got 10 talents, someone that got 5, and someone got 1. And you remember in that story that the person, the property manager or whatever, was really annoyed with the person that only got 1 talent because he just kept it and hid it in the ground and got it out. He said, this is the end of that story. It says, then the man who had received 1 bag of gold, Master, he said, I knew that you were a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid. So he got the one thing and then he hid it in the ground, and the other people, oblivious to that, did what they needed to do. And I think the curiosity in that story for me is the other 2 people didn't think that the master was hard. They just did it. So where did that come from? Was that reality or not? I'm not sure. We don't know, do we? But what we know from that story is God not only wants a relationship with us and a connection to us, he wants us to do something with our lives. Does your perception of God stop you from doing something for God? Are you too scared to do something for God? Are you too disconnected to do something from him? But God is displeased when we do nothing, is the moral of that story. He not only wants us to know us, he wants us to do something. And you might think you're a 1 talent person, that's all I am. But I've got to do something with that 1. If you're a 10 talent, you've got more to answer for. But if you're 1 like me, do something. God's not happy with the nothing. And that story also gives us consequences for doing nothing. A whole lot of fire happening, right? So God is asking us to do something for him with our lives. So what's the problem? It's you. You know when people say it's not me, it's you? No, it's you. Well, it's the baggage you bring to your relationship with God. It's the busyness, it's the excuses. The 1 person got 10 and did lots, but the person that got 1 didn't do anything, did he? Because he chickened out. If you got a 1, you've got to use it. What you think God is saying to you affects, what you think God is thinking affects what God is saying. So do not trust yourself in understanding God. Invest time into understanding God by reading his word. The problem with your memory about your experiences is that it can be faulty. The problem with your memory about your experiences with God is that can also be faulty. In his book, Think Why You Should Question Everything, Guy Harrison says that memory is fallible. In other words, your memory is not an exact recording of what happened, and no matter how well or vividly you remember something, it may not be accurate. Your memories may come to you in great detail and feel 100% accurate, but it actually doesn't matter. They easily could be partial or total lies that your brain is telling you. Really, the personal past that your brain is supposed to be keeping safe for you is not what you think it is. Your memories are pieces and batches of information that your brain cobbles together and serves up to you, not to present the past as accurately as possible, but to provide you with information that you will likely find to be useful in the present. Functional value, not accuracy, is the priority. See, the biggest problem is when we struggle, we forget about the accuracy of the goodness of God. We forget because we patch stuff together and construct stuff, and we forget the goodness of God. Have you forgot the goodness of God in your life today? Just want to read from Psalm 22. Now, David knew about the pain of life, and he deeply felt the anguish of not hearing from God like he should. Psalm 22. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me? So far from my cries of anguish. My God, I cry out to you, but you do not answer. By night I find no rest. Do you know that psalm? Probably not. Know the next one, don't we? Psalm 23, just after. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall lack nothing. I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Same guy, same piece of paper. Just wrote them right next to each other. So what changed? What changed for him? Psalm 22, this is the clue. I will declare your name, back to the first one, to my people. In the assembly I will praise you, for he has not despised or scorned the suffering of the afflicted one. He has not hidden his face from him, but has listened to his cry for help. David connects with God's people and God's house, and he remembers. That is how you have accurate memories. By connecting back with the people that love you and in a place where God is with you. He remembers that God is listening to him. We are emotional beings. We are broken. We are fallen. We have highs. We have lows. The only fail-safe is to return to the foot of the cross and remember that Jesus paid the ultimate price for you. That brings you back to correct memories. Our memories are fallible. They move around. That's why we take communion. I think the least we can do is gather into his house and worship him. Find your gratitude today. Find it. We forget. We forget how we got here. Let's finish where we started. The Lord was with Samuel as he grew up, and he let none of Samuel's words fall to the ground. And all of Israel, from Dan to Beersheba, recognized that Samuel was attested as a prophet of the Lord. The Lord continued to appear. He had stopped appearing at Shiloh, and there he revealed himself to Samuel through his word. What can we take away from this? See, God did not disgrace Samuel. We can take that away. We also can take away that God actually stopped appearing to Samuel like when he was young. So if you feel like God's not connecting with you in the same way, it may be because you're mature enough to learn and for him to speak to you through his word. Because that's what he did with Samuel. That's what maturity is. Getting into God's word, making time, reading God's word, which is God's person coming out to you. God speaks to us through his word, not just through people. Are you taking the time to do that is the question, isn't it? So I don't want us to be discouraged if you haven't heard from God for a while. It happens sometimes. We've had the greatest of all interrupters in our modern history. Samuel was actually living in God's temple. We can spend more time in the church. We are more likely to hear from God when we gather and are disciplined coming together. It's a great place to hear from God. Samuel was sleeping near the Ark of the Covenant, which is where God is represented. He was trying to hear from God. But remember, how many nights did he sleep there when he hadn't heard from God? Took a while, it seems, doesn't it? But he was committed to doing what he was told to do and to be close to God. So can I encourage you today, do something to be actively near God. Church is great for that. Be actively near God regularly. Physically coming and making an effort to be in God's presence is good for you. Physically coming and actively being in God's presence is good for you. You may be thinking, well, I'm here today. I do the stats. I know how often people are coming to church. Most people are coming less than before COVID. A chunk of people, in fact, 200 people across our 3 campuses aren't coming anymore. We've had the greatest of interrupters. I want to remind you today, and if you're watching online, which means you're not here, and that may be because you've got COVID, fine, there's obviously times you can't be here, but physically coming is good for you. It's good for you. Being together is good for you. I don't care if you like it. I don't care if you don't like women preachers. It's happening. It's happening. God made me a woman. This is what's happening, right? Hear from you online later. Super. I don't care. God has brought us together to grow and love each other and encourage each other. I don't care if you don't feel like you don't get anything out of it. That's maybe about you. Maybe about you. Seriously, our worship is so heartfelt and beautiful. Our preaching is generally quite good quality. But you've got to stop thinking it's about yourself. It is good for you to be here. And COVID's done a fantastic job. It is so anti-Christ because it's pulled so many people out of the church, or it's just allowed them to have a great excuse to not come to church. Being around godly people is very important in your journey, and you are just as important to them as we are. Everyone's important. Being close to godly people supports you through hard times. Could be a breakup, could be an illness, it could be mental health. Being with godly people is important. The other thing is, godly people can help you discern that what you're thinking God is saying is either revolutionary or crackers crazy. If you're doing that on your own, you're actually not part of a body that can balance things out and make some sense, right? If you've got a revolutionary idea or something that God has revealed to you, that is fantastic. Love it. But it's okay to check, is it full tote crackers crazy? Because there's a bit of that around, all right? So there's a whole lot of imbalance happening because people are going solo. We are not called for solo. We are called for here. So, off my soapbox. Hearing from God is important. It is important. Let me say that again. Hearing from God is important to you. You need it. You need it so much. Hearing from God helps you shape your plans. Stop making bad choices, making good choices. Hearing from God stops you from feeling dry, stops you from feeling unloved. It helps you find direction. It helps you find peace. It helps you find place and purpose. Hearing from God is the most important thing, Because without it, you've got family doing all kinds of stuff and you're not even noticing because you're so haywire. Hearing from God is important today. It's important for every one of you here. Jesus. So the way we're going to finish today, we're just going to sit. I'm going to give you a chance to actually just hear from God. He is here. He is here for you. He has something to say to you. If you've never heard from him before, have a chat with some of these beautiful people up the front or someone that you're comfortable with. They can share about their own experience of hearing from God. You might need someone around you to just pray with you. That's also fine. Of course, we're here for each other. But we're just going to finish the service like this. No hype. I want you to be able to sit and let God speak to you. He will. He will. So please just give each other some space. If you need someone to support you, we're absolutely here. But when you're done, just go out into the cafe, spend some time with people, encourage someone. Thank you, Jesus. Thanks for being here today. I'll leave it with it.